Thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday. I know that this is taking time out of your day and out of your weekend, but we've built something for you guys today that is hopefully going to bring you the most amount of value. And it's day 2 of crafting your outreach and basing your interviews in our How to Land a Visa Sponsored Role in 2025 workshop. For those of you that don't know myself and Rim, we are the co-founders of Migrates. We have built a community platform that features a job board with over 10,000 sponsored roles. We do CV reviews, Q&As. We have over 150 hours worth of content, and we do workshops and webinars every single week for our members, discussing all the different topics and all the different sectors and ways that they can land a visa-sponsored role. But we are giving this information fully free to the public because we are on a mission to help 500 people land visa-sponsored jobs in 2025. So thanks for joining our mission. We're really happy to have you here. Please do engage in the chat. Rim will be also, and Rim and I will both be engaging in the chat as the session goes on. As I said, all the recordings and the pitch presentations will be shared post workshop after day 3 tomorrow, and early next week we will be sharing all of the materials. So let's get into it. What are we going to be covering in day 2? I'm sure you're wondering. So, crafting your outreach and acing interviews. Now, this is going to be a very interesting day because this is fundamentally one of the most important parts of landing a visa sponsored job. Everyone always thinks negotiating sponsorship is the thing that is most important, but actually it's about the pre-negotiation, how you position yourself, how you communicate your value, how you present yourself in interviews. So we're going to be running through networking, referrals, effective outreach, interview etiquette, do's and don'ts, analyzing job specs, and most importantly, we'll be joined by one of our many Migrates coaches, Maureen, who is joining us all the way from the US, actually, which is where she's at the moment, to discuss the question of tell me about yourself. So please do stay on until the end. We will also be offering more homework, more giveaways, and more awesome things for you guys to take part in. So let's get straight into it. But before we start, let's pick our lucky winner from day 1. We are going to, for those that don't know, we're going to quickly review a LinkedIn profile of one of the individuals that joined us yesterday. So without further ado, Rayla, congrats, you're the winner. For those of you that didn't join us, yesterday we went through what an optimized LinkedIn profile looks like. And for anyone who followed us on Instagram, we picked a winner and we said that we would be reviewing their LinkedIn profile today. So Rayla, sorry to put you on the spot in front of 330 people, but welcome. It's nice to have you here. We do this kind of thing within Migrates all the time, just with less people on the call. So how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Awesome. Well, so I'm going to run through your profile quickly, but before I do that, I just need to ask you a question. What is the typical role title that you're applying for?
Well, right now, I think I'm in the middle of I want to switch more towards human resources type jobs, I think. Something more corporate based. Right now, I work very one-on-one with kids because that was what was available when I graduated, the type of jobs.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't seem like it's something I want to do long term. So yeah, right now I'm kind of transitioning.
hmm Understood. Yeah, I mean, look, doing a pivot, especially early on in your career, can seem a little bit difficult when a lot of the previous experience you've acquired has been in a completely different field. So thanks for giving me that insight. I'm not going to ask you any more questions. I'm now just going to run through some things, some quick fire things that you can do on your profile to change and, get yourself in front of those employers in the first instance. So first things first, especially if you're going for more corporate roles, I love this picture. I think you look great, but you need something a little bit more polished. I think something like in front of just a plain white background, maybe wearing like a navy shirt. So, like there's no color contrast, but something that just allows you to look a little bit more kind of corporate-y, I guess. I'm
Yeah.
not like the biggest fan of telling people to do this, but unfortunately in the corporate world, there's a certain kind of aesthetic and look that employers look for as well. So, and the second thing that I noticed is that you only have this occupational psychologist title. And to me, I actually was really confused because I was thinking, is she a psychologist? But that, despite you being trained in psychology, that isn't actually what you have experience in or what you're positioning yourself to go into as a career. So I think that's something that you definitely kind of need to change. Maybe you could say something like, was it an MS? Oh, it's a BASC. So you could say something like BAC psychology dash, and then maybe the focus area of work that you're interested in. So the sector that you were discussing, whether it's kind of like a little bit more, did you say it was more towards human resources roles?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, so maybe you could say something like humans resources, another dash, and then you could say something like your statement of intent. So, you could say like looking to facilitate better kind of like internal communications within teams or within organizations, just so that it's a little bit more clear on what your intent is for your career in general. So it states that intent quite quickly and visibly on. The next section, your about me. I mean, amazing that you're fluent in so many different languages. Very cool. And I love that you're a published poet. And I think that's something that you should definitely keep. But you remember how we styled it yesterday, where we said that, kind of like, I am this, I am doing that, or like, I have built a career in XYZ, and I'm now looking to focus in on XYZ. So, just kind of presenting that example of like what your previous career history has looked like, and also what it is that you are looking to achieve in the future of your career as well. So you could definitely leverage your experience of working as a workshop facilitator. I would actually take the part that says volunteer here, because I think that it's not necessary for an employer or a recruiter to know that you are a volunteer. That's something that you can discuss in the interview itself. But given that you are a workshop facilitator, I imagine quite a lot of work that you did was organizing, managing, working with people, which are all transferable skills, especially if you're looking to segue into more of a human resources or human focused role within an organization. So I would also definitely include a bit more information, given that this is all very bare bones. I think that you can kind of say like, as a childcare worker at Koru Kids, my core responsibilities include, and then just list 3 key things that you're currently doing at Koru. Then as a workshop facilitator, you can say, because at the moment, again, you're focusing on the business, not necessarily on what you did within the business.
Mhm.
And adapting it to what you did. And if you worked on, perhaps maybe you actually facilitated a workshop that got over 1,000 people, or whatever kind of a major accomplishment was when you were in that position. I think it's important that you list that here. The same here for a sales floor team manager member. So you don't need to say sales floor team member. You could just say like sales associate. You could even say like customer associate, because again, it positions you as someone who has those people skills, which are a definite prerequisite when you're working within the people space of working with managing people or trying to create better team structures within an organization. And for a project administrator, again, I think you need to explain a bit more on what it was that you did in this position as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of things to go from. Rim, is there anything that you might want to add as some spice to the LinkedIn profile? Wow, Rim looked really shocked there. She was like, she was
I'm
really,
actually answering questions as well, like
yeah.
as I'm going. But no, I think Karina, you covered all of it, and I think like between like this and everything that we have covered yesterday, when you guys get the recording, you will definitely like have a lot of insights around. Because also in the chat, a lot of people are asking, like sending their LinkedIn profiles and asking for feedback. And maybe like I think it's worth recapping for context. This was like a one-off competition that like we had yesterday. And Rayla was like the lucky winner. So like for the remaining of this session, we will not be doing like any LinkedIn reviews. It is something that, again, like we covered yesterday in terms of having the basics. Also inside Migrates, the membership, we actually do LinkedIn reviews and CV reviews every single week. So if you guys end up joining us, you will be able to actually have access to a very similar review to what Karina just did right now for Rayla.
Yes, and sorry, I forgot to mention as well with your education, I think for the most part this is fine unless you did like some kind of thesis or dissertation that focused specifically on an industry, like within the industry that you would like to highlight. And maybe, I think listing 19 skills is okay. I don't think it's an overload. but also look into seeing what kind of skill sets do other people that work in the ideal role type that you're going after on LinkedIn specifically have listed, so that you can also kind of add those to your skill set. But yeah, I think like giving a bit more, I could honestly, I feel like I need 15 to 20 minutes to fully deep dive into this, but hopefully this has given you some quick things to do that will just make those changes, yeah, just easy to implement. Thanks so much for jumping on, Rayla.
No, thank you. My LinkedIn has been pretty neglected lately, so I'll be taking a lot of your advice and really working and tuning that. Thank you.
Awesome. No, you're welcome, and enjoy the rest of the session. Now we're gonna get into day 2. So there is actually another giveaway competition in this day, so, and it's gonna be even more fun. So hopefully that's something that people can get involved in as well. Networking, referrals, and landing interviews. I am passing the microphone over to Rim, who is our resident networker, referral, and expert when it comes to these topics.
Thank you so much, Karina. Okay, so actually being the kind of expert, but really being also like on the receiving end and having experience like this, like firsthand, I think it's very important for me to kind of start with first of all, actually before I go into this, can I get in the chat, like how do you guys feel about networking, like in general, like when you hear networking, like what is the kind of first response? Okay, okay, love that. Scary, we have a lot. Awkward, wait, someone said I like it, and I love that energy. Intimidating, one side, that's very interesting. It might be irritating, empowering. Okay, I love that. So I think actually the best way to kind of go forward is to understand that actually there is more than one type of networking. And this is what I wanted to cover for like the remaining of this section. There are actually 4 types of networking that I'm going to be talking about today. The first one is warm introductions. The second one, peer-to-peer. Third one, upper networking, and fourth one, conventional referrals. So let's actually start with what I think is the quickest and most effective one out of like this list, which yes, is definitely warm introductions. So I think so ultimately when you network, what you want to do is to either like use that interaction in order to help you as a job seeker to land a role, or more importantly, you know, you need to kind of plant the seeds in order for you to be able to build rapport with a lot of people in your industry, outside your industry, but that can really help you with getting ahead in your kind of early professional career. And in my experience, and in the experience of so many members that we have had so far, around like 300, and both Karina and myself facilitate a lot of these like conversations and introductions, the most effective networking strategy that you can actually that you can go for is definitely asking for a warm introduction. And there are a lot of like reasons that go into why this is the most effective. Like for example, here you can see I have actually put some screenshots between Nicole, who's one of our members. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, that's the one. So this was actually the initial intro chat that I have started between Anna, who essentially was like an ex-colleague, background in architecture, really struggled a lot initially to be able to make it into the industry, and then very beautifully transitioned into being a more of like an account and product manager within the kind of tech design space. And we had this member within our community, Nicole, still a member, who essentially was looking to do something very similar. And here, again, I put them together in touch. Yeah, here you can see like Anna's response, which like literally happened within hours. And I think this is like very important to highlight, because when you ask for a warm introduction, I think, and you probably already know this, but there's like a kind of a social pressure element that kind of your common, like essentially like degree connection ends up like applying implicitly. And also, I think the great thing is that when someone actually makes your warm introduction, they get to talk about you. Like, for example, in my initial message, you know, like I explained a little bit more about like Nicole's profile and the similarities that I saw with Anna as well. And I think in a way, like you could really pick someone who could do like that heavy lifting for you. And I know that like this can be extremely hard when you are actually like an international talent in a foreign country and you really do not have a lot of I see the chat, and we don't really, and you don't actually have a lot of like connections. But I think this is actually the perfect example, and I love that like Steffi, because we featured her on this slide, because this is like the whole point of why we created actually Migrates. Because here, what I'm using is literally like my like intro message with Steffi, and I introed another member of our community to her, Tammy. And so Steffi, who essentially like worked as a founder's associate, international talent background as well, could really empathize with like Temi, and they had like a beautiful conversation in terms of helping him with like his next step on this journey. And so
And Stephanie's on the call, so thanks, Steffi, for joining.
yeah, thank you so much, Steffi. And I think like there's definitely something to be said around the importance of, we love you too, Steffi, around, we could not have like rehearsed this better, just like how
Yeah.
organically this happened. But I think this is like really the important takeaways that I think if you can go for a warm intro, go for it. And sometimes, you know, you really need to invest early on in really trying to expand your network. And sometimes the easiest way, and I will actually go back to this later, is trying to join communities and groups who can expand that network. And here, like Steffi's example with Temi is like the perfect example of that. So that's kind of number one. Number two, that's the kind of most effective step in terms of like networking. But then sometimes you obviously need to extend a little bit the timeline you're working with, and you need to play a bit of a longer game. You need to plant the seeds, and this is essentially what ends up happening when it comes to peer-to-peer networking and upward networking. In this case, there's definitely like method to the madness, because you cannot just expect to essentially like approach a for like is essentially someone who's completely like foreign to you and directly like ask them for something without having some sort of like method or framework that helps you with essentially like building that rapport first. And again, kind of having seen this being done like on the daily with so many of our members trying to actually connect like both on a peer-to-peer level. And by peer-to-peer, what I mean is someone who's kind of, you know, in a very kind of similar stage of their career, they have the same role title as you, or upward being someone that is more senior than you, so like a few years ahead of you. Essentially what you want to do, you want to really invest initially in building that rapport before you make kind of any you know, before you move on to the next step of trying to like ask them for anything in terms of like giving you a job. So here are the kind of 3 steps that I would definitely recommend you follow. Is one, it's very important for you to authentically connect. So for example, this can actually come from like any like specific angle or standpoint. You can use, for example, you know, like being part of the same alumni network, whether this person has done, you know, has had a similar path in terms of, for example, doing a career pivot, or even like someone who has been to like a foreign undergrad university on their LinkedIn, and then you could play the card of being, you know, like a foreign talent as well. So that's kind of number one. Like it's really important for you to try and authentically connect with that person outside even what your needs are immediately from a professional standpoint. And then it's very important for you to have a clear intention. You can't just like approach people without understanding exactly what it is that you want. Do you want them to mentor you? Do you want to get their perspective on something? Do you want to, you know, like have a coffee with them? So it's really important for you to first clarify that for yourself before you approach them. And finally, you need to have a very specific ask. So if we go to the next slide, please, I'll show you actually an example here. And I was essentially like looking here for some of like senior kind of data profiles. And here like Jingwei was like the perfect example for this. You can see here like how I have taken that like 3-step approach. And I have drafted an example because I definitely believe that a lot of the things that a lot of our members struggle with, and I'm guessing you too, is, you know, seeing something being done to understand what works and what doesn't. Yeah, so like the first kind of paragraph that you need to lead with is definitely like this part that I mentioned around like authentically connecting. And so for example, in this case, what I try to speak to and definitely make it focused about like the person you're approaching is their background and something that truly like piqued your interest in their profile. So for example, in this case, I'm making a comment about her current employer because I genuinely like did not know that, you know, like this person, that like the London Exchange Group was actually like a London Exchange Group, right? So that's kind of the first thing. So you want to lead with something that is kind of very specific to them and in a way really like connect authentically around that. The second bit is definitely basically like having the clear intention and truly stating like what it is that you're looking for. And here, I think when it comes, for example, to data profiles, a lot of people early on in their data careers really struggle with like making this choice between data analytics and data science. And so when you kind of explicitly like share that with someone who's a little bit more senior and more ahead, like that really kind of resonates with them. And so when you share that intention, like they already know essentially why you're approaching them to begin with. Finally, it's the specific ask. And I think here it's very important for you to signal that you don't just want to have access to that person's time. You actually have like a very specific ask that you want to get out of the call, which in this case is like, you know, I really want some time with you so that I can ask you about your specific set of skills. And, you know, and this will really help me because I think that having that language and like that awareness or specific awareness will really help me move forward. And finally, and I think this is really important, I understand that you might not always like have the chance to do this, but if you can, you know, like invest in a little 10-pound voucher or like 5-pound coffee voucher, it can really like make a difference and signal that, you know, you are really precious about like this person's time and that you're not, you know, just wasting your time and theirs. So that's kind of one example that I think, yeah, has worked definitely in the past when it comes to peer-to-peer and upward networking. Now, referrals, and I think this is like a very important part of like the networking process to talk about because I see so many people approach it like in a non-accurate way, like really, and therefore a non-effective way, which is if someone does not know you, you sending them a message and asking them for a referral is just not something that is going to work. First of all, because this person has like a reputation to upkeep within their workplace, but also because like there's no incentive for them actually to like be able to refer you to begin with, unless there are some specific use cases which I'm going to cover. But here I actually included an example of someone that I used to work with. And here, you know, I asked for a referral through a warm introduction, and their response to me was, was the fact that I cannot actually refer anyone who I have not directly worked with. And I think it's really important to like hear it from the mouth of the horse, I believe is like the expression, the horse's mouth, because I think, sorry, English, not my first language, but yeah. So I think it's very important for you to understand, like also the state of mind of the person on the other end, which in this case would be someone like Simon. However, referrals do work sometimes. So what's the play here? And essentially the play is that the first thing is that you really need to mobilize your first degree direct connections. If you want to ask for referral, you need to ask it from someone who you know personally. So either they have worked with you, you have met them before, you have a personal relationship. So really capitalize on that. And I know that sometimes this is really, again, rare to come by if you're not very well connected and you live in a foreign country. But sometimes that is a possibility. And if that's the case, that's what you need to essentially prioritize when it comes to asking for referrals. Second, ask for a warm introduction, which is essentially exactly what happens with like the case with Simon that I showcased. And sometimes it can be like a no, which in this case it was, but other times it can be a yes. Like if that person, that mutual connection really vouches for you and they're like, I have worked with this person, they are really good. Like knowing you and knowing them, I know that like they will be a perfect cultural fit for the company you work for. So that's kind of one option. The third option here is definitely like using cultural ties if possible. And I'm mentioning this because I think in some like specific cultures, like, depending on the kind of primary communities that you belong to, sometimes I think there is real like personal investment in wanting to like create that solidarity and foster it. And so sometimes it can actually like be really easy for you to, you know, tap into these kind of other communities because they are personally invested in you and they will, you know, like introduce you to their kind of, you know, wider circles, etc. So again, it can be done, and I have seen it being done. And finally, and I think this is really perhaps the most kind of where the majority of you will need to kind of invest more, because I think this is where you can really kind of like feel empowered because it is within your control. It's going back to that point that I made around like planting mid to like longer term seeds by connecting with people at your top choice companies. Because what you end up actually realizing is that it's a very small world. And so when you end up connecting with someone who maybe is like early in their career, right? Or like they just worked for a company that you liked, what ends up happening is that if you nurture that relationship and you keep, you know, you do a little bit of relationship upkeep and maintenance, like 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, like that person actually could become that first degree direct connection, like with that lag of time. Now, I wanted to still kind of showcase two of our success stories here who have actually successfully, while still, you know, like applying and going through different routes in terms of trying to maximize their chances of like landing a sponsored offer. So Chulpan and Apurva are two of our success stories that were able to actually successfully mobilize their networks through, you know, like asking for warm introductions and tapping into other kind of solidarity circles. So it can definitely be done, but it's not like where kind of the majority of your chances will end up being in a way. Yeah, now, you know, that's on networking, but out of curiosity, like where else do you think you should be focusing your efforts? There's definitely an element about community-based networking that I think you guys really, really need to start taking very, very seriously, even if at first it does not necessarily like yield the results that you're after. Here, I wanted to showcase some examples of where you can find these kind of communities. And obviously, I would need to start with migreats because, like, the very idea of us being community-led and community-first came from this need. Like, we know that it's really hard for you to essentially be able to tap into communities that understand your international talent experience because it is hard. It is very isolating. It's like you move in the world, you go to meetups, you go to Eventbrite events and conferences, and, you know, like everyone in the room has an experience. And deep down, like, you know, in your head, you're always thinking about your sponsorship, and not many people get that. But within Migrates, we're really trying to foster a community feel and having weekly guests who actually have been either skilled worker veterans or people who have, you know, like
employers,
from an
recruiters.
international. But actually, it's really interesting that because Karina actually always pushes for us to like have people who are on the other end of the spectrum, because that's something that we know is currently missing. You know, you need to speak to the recruiters, you need to speak to the employers. So Michael actually here, he was inside a Migrates webinar. He was hosting a Migrates webinar 2 to 3 weeks ago, and one of our members, Kristen, actually reached out to him, and then she reported that, you know, like she had a great chat with him and like, you know, great connection. And I think that's really important to showcase because that's like literally the type of like community feel and community interactions that we want to create inside Migrates. Next week, we're actually also going to get Annie, who is like, you know, an ex-colleague of mine, absolute superstar, has hired for so many different startups in London. And so I have been trying to get her for so long so that she can actually talk about like that experience and just share with our candidates like how other people who are making decisions about their future think about things and giving them that like insider insight, because no one gave me that. And I just think that's really, you know, really, really sad. But now we have migrates and we can change that. Sorry to go on that tangent, but there's Karina. Oh, are you gonna?
Yes, I just wanted to quickly also show that we are also going to be doing another session with, sorry, I wanted to show the, sorry, I'm going a bit off piste, but Johan Pavi.
Oh my God, yes. Sorry, I'm such actually a girl fan of Johan is an absolute superstar, y'all. We are getting him next week.
So he used to be the CMO of Depop and Deliveroo, and he now works at a company called AI Apply, and he's going to be doing a webinar for us and our community next week. So our goal really is, as we move forward with the future of Migrates, is to start bringing more employers, more recruiters onto our platform and getting them to speak to our members as well. So definitely utilize that, whether you're on the free trial or a paid member, definitely utilize it. Sorry, Rim, to take over your slide.
No, but this is no, I absolutely love this because I think in a way it's like, accessing like other networks of other people by proxy. And I feel like, like all these years of you and I planting the seeds, it's something that you can, we can very easily give access to, through actually like the Migrates community network. And yeah, can't wait actually for Johan's session. I'm not gonna lie. But anyways, so yeah, definitely tap into specialized communities. If you're an international talent, Migrates is the place for you. Real life events and meetups. Meetups is a great app, Eventbrite. If you're, for example, in tech, try to like join tech meetups, design meetups. There is one for every single kind of industry or field. So make sure that like you're utilizing that. And finally, one that was actually really interesting that we literally like had one of our success stories, Renee here, talk about at length in an Ask Me Anything session that she did, I believe around 3 weeks ago, was co-working spaces. And so as part actually of her process, what she ended up doing was joining like a local co-working space. And that's how she ended up essentially meeting the founder of the business that ended up sponsoring her. I
Getting
think
a license.
yeah, get a license and then move through with like sponsorship. And yeah, we have the recording of that session. She actually made some really great points around like her method and how she went about this and the entire ecosystem that she created for herself to make sure that like she was having like the best chances of success when it comes to landing a sponsored role.
So I noticed a few questions as well about, like, well, I'm afraid, or like, I don't know how to do this. Is it too forward to send someone a coffee voucher? And I'm here to tell you something. There is a method to the madness as well. And sometimes you really have to go forward and be very punchy and make things happen yourself. And that is called outreach. And it's a very similar technique used in sales. So I want to quickly recap just to people like why I am very well positioned to talk about this. So I was sponsored by Cedars, where I worked for nearly 2 years in a sales role, and I generated over 800 million in revenue. Sorry, 800 million. God, I wish 800,000 in revenue for them. And I also worked at Klaviyo, which is not, is it on here? Where's the Klaviyo logo? Klaviyo logo has disappeared. But I worked at Klaviyo for 8 months as a sales representative. And I really, truly believe that when you're job hunting, it's very similar to sales because you're not, I was selling a product, but in the instance of job hunting, you are selling yourself. And the way that you do it is you have to show value. And the thing is that there's a completely secret job market that you don't know of and that isn't visible to the wider public. It's not being posted on LinkedIn. There's no roles being advertised online. There is a job market that exists that you have to find through the power of reaching out to people completely cold with no personal connection, no personal relationship, and going at it in a way that is very creative. And I love talking about this because we have so many ideas and so many ways that you can do this inside of Migrates, but I'll quickly just recap a few things that you can be doing. So you have to become the product. You know how I said that salespeople sell products? You have to be the product. And that means you have to showcase value. So what is effective cold outreach? Cold outreach is basically sending a message or an email to someone that you don't have any connection or relationship with, but it's showcasing a value proposition to land an interview without explicitly stating your need for employment. Now, what does that actually mean? That sounds like a song and dance that doesn't actually make much sense, right? You basically have to position yourself in a way that is going to give them value, going to give them something that will, help accelerate their business growth or show them that you're someone that's really interested in what they're creating. And sometimes you can state that you need employment, but a lot of the time, effective outreach is also one where you don't need to explicitly say, I'm looking for a job, can you hire me? Because no one is going to hire you if you just tell them that. The first thing that you need to do is find your target. So whether it's the employer, an employee, or a hiring manager, this is a person that you want to get in front of. They're typically someone who's a bit more senior because they're the people that will make decisions and, kind of place you in the rooms that you need to be placed into. The second thing is that you need to research their organization or them. So I'm not just talking like, you say, oh, I really like what you're doing at X company. No, you need to find some kind of personal point to touch on that connects you to them. Maybe you have, I don't know, previously been at the same university as them. Maybe you've noticed that they're interested in the same things as you. Maybe you've seen that they used to work at a different company that you've heard of because you were working at a competitor. I don't care what it is, you have to find some kind of point of reference or something that makes it a little bit more personal. And the third thing that you need to do is reach out to them in a creative way and show value. So, and also have a CTA. Sorry, I didn't realize there's so many things in this, but yes, these are all the things that you need to do. You have to show value in that cold outreach and also have a call to action. That is what a CTA means. You need to basically push for the next stage of the conversation and what would happen next. So I'm just going to show you guys a couple of my own examples. So this is from a very, very long time ago. This is back when Deliveroo wasn't as famous as it is today. Back in 2016, when I was still studying at university, I emailed them from January up until May of 2016 to get an internship. I applied using their website. I then sent them, I didn't actually have the email that I sent to them initially, but I sent them a very personalized message where I basically talked about why I think they should get students to present Deliveroo like in Edinburgh. They hadn't yet launched in Edinburgh, which is where I was studying, and I was telling them that they needed to bring Deliveroo to Edinburgh and why students, aka me, would be the best placed person to help like launch the brand there. I mean, I was very ambitious, but I landed an internship. They weren't even advertising it by the time that I got the internship, and that's because I truly just wanted to work there so badly that I made it happen. I had no connections. I had no personal network with anyone there. I just made them understand that I was someone that could add value, even in an internship capacity. The next one is Odin. So Odin, funnily enough, is a company that we actually helped them get their sponsor license with Migreats, but I've known about them since I was working at my previous employer at Cedars. So when I reached out to the founder of Odin, I opened with something like I said, hi, I just didn't want to list his name. Hi, P. I'm just going to say, hi, P. I hope you don't mind me getting in touch directly, but as a salesperson, I can't help but employ a more direct outbound approach. I was on a call yesterday with X person who is using Odin for their pre-seed round. I'd heard previously, but decided to do a bit of a deep dive into the business. I then talked to them a little bit. I said, I'll cut to the chase. I've been at Cedars for the last year and a half. I said where I began my career. And I saw that they were advertising for a role. So I did want to create that emphasis that that's what I was looking for. I saw the growth and partnership lead open at Odin and wanted to throw my hat into the mix. Alternatively, we can always talk about your time at Crowdcube and whether or not you are still a fan of Borscht, which I mean, you guys are probably thinking, what is that? What is she even talking about? So he used to work at Crowdcube, and on his profile, it said that he actually learned Russian. So he had like Russian as a language that he spoke, but he just learned it throughout his, I guess, career or throughout university. I'm not sure. So I used that as like a personal thing, a personal touch, because I knew that like he would read this message and say, oh, she's done her research. She also knows I speak Russian. And borscht is a Russian kind of soup. I'm also Russian. So I was creating that connection without even explicitly saying anything about, his own Russian background or Russian speaking skills. I didn't get this job. I didn't succeed in the interview round for this job, but I got a response from him in 15 minutes, and he's the business owner of this company. I didn't send my CV. I didn't put my LinkedIn. I just employed a very personal approach to him, and it got me into the interview round. Didn't know him, didn't have any connection. Okay. Next one is scale up finance. Again, applied for the role. This was my last role before I started Migreats. I reached out very short, nothing like too personal about him, but I knew again that their business, the kind of customers they were looking for, is exactly the kind of customers I used to sell to. So they were founders, they were other founders, right? So I said in this message, blah, 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 I'm connecting for the AE role. This is the CRO, so the most senior person, the chief of sales in the business. I said, I'm at Cedars, so majority of what I do is help founders raise funds and have amassed an extensive founder network in the UK as a result. I was also massively bluffing. I hadn't amassed a massive founder network. I'd been working at Cedars for a year and a half. Like, I knew people. I didn't know everyone. I didn't have a huge network in founders, but I told them that like that was me showing them that I could bring value from the exact moment that I got in touch, right? So like this is what I'm saying is that when you're reaching out to people, you need to be showing them value. You need to say something around like, like having some kind of CTA, having them getting on a call, having them like, have a conversation with you. And if they don't respond, just again, sending them a message in a few days afterwards and just saying, hey, just flagging this up again. I'd love to chat to you about what I know about this industry or what about I know about this space that can help you supercharge your growth or supercharge whatever it is that they're trying to do. But you need to be able to understand what their business does. Otherwise, you're kind of like, just shooting your shot for no reason. I would say you really need to understand what they do and how what you have done previously aligns with their business mission. So must-dos for outreach. You should always have a template that you kind of stick to and follow. A strong subject line, like example, your next founder associate. That's a pretty good one. Always have a call to action. So, let's get on a call. I'd love to connect and chat. Like, do you have 5 minutes next week? A calendar link. Stick to a sequence. So I was talking about this, but we actually have built this out in Migrates as well. Like, what is your outreach sequence? Like, this is accessible for our Migrates members. And communicate cross-platform. And what I mean by this is you really need to use tools like Rocket Reach. So everyone thinks LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is really saturated. What you need to actually do is use Rocket Reach, get their email, and send them an email because people are more likely to respond to emails. And also, sorry, I'm not trying to advertise Migrates too much. And you literally can join us free for a week and then just just go for it that way. But we did a really incredible webinar with the head of sales at a startup called Cred, and he basically discussed this whole process. He walked it through for an hour. He gave a lot of information. He showed a lot of examples, and he talked exactly about how to do this outreach. And this is from someone who is the head of sales at a business who has landed jobs himself through this method. So, and not being you don't need to say I'm international talent. Okay, he's not international talent, but I was international talent when I was doing this, and I still was getting on calls, and I was still getting interviews and opportunities. So yeah, this is kind of like your must do. Now, we're going to invite one of our Migrates members. He is a Migrates member of the month in December. His name is Sai. Sai, thank you so much for joining us. Sai is one of our favorite community members. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you've been doing and how you've been outreaching companies?
Sure. So I think I started outreach 1 month into joining migrants. About previous to that, I didn't even know that you could do something like it. I usually do it on LinkedIn. Just send them a message, and no one usually used to accept my request or anything like that. So I realized, I had to go on another route. I think it was in one of the Q&A sessions that he suggested that maybe I can do a direct email outreach to the roles that are like. So that's when I started working on it. Initially, it was very, very, very tough, but it's like email reach out is basically trying to get past the great war of recruiters. So it's like recruiter or in-house HR is someone it's like they would consider other factors besides your talent. The visa situation is like it's a big no for them. So I have to get past them and directly connect with the hiring managers. It's like just to because they are the ones who are actually in charge of the recruitment process. They are the ones who are the decision makers on whether to, hire a person or not. So you have to get past because any application you actually send conventionally, it would definitely go through the recruiters. And like when they see that if you require sponsorship or not, usually 90% of the time, it's like they just throw it in the bin. It's like you either get ghosted or rejected. So, but the hiring managers, they don't actually care about the visa stuff, visa and admin stuff. They just want to hire the best person possible for them. So that's one of the big reasons why I started doing the outreaches. It's like, and also it would also be a chance for you to get on a call with them. Just an informal call, just to show the enthusiasm for the role, and it's like just so that okay, they might keep you in mind as okay, this is the guy. Actually, so took that initiative and reached out to me and had a call with. So and it also increases your chance of of success or of going to the interview because you could ask tips about the role, you could get to know more about the role, beyond the job description, and you could use those insights in your, for example, in your application or in your interview. So it's like, these are one of the very, some of the reasons why outreach is better. And, it's like email, outreaching through email gives you that sort of structure because, it's like these days, LinkedIn, it's like hiring managers are overwhelmed with lots of LinkedIn connection requests and everything. And also, even if you do an email through LinkedIn, I think emails, they would actually check their emails more than they check their LinkedIn in my experience. So I think doing that email outreach is like better in that. So that's why you have to do an outreach, especially in this market where it's like just applying for the role and hoping that they would get back to you. It's not at all enough, especially for international talent like us, because it's like I think most of the roles ask for the right to work in the UK, and recruiters will see that you require a visa and then just check it out. So I think reaching out to the hiring managers is a good thing. You can also reach out to the founders, especially if you are looking for roles in startups. It's like they usually, if it's a small startup, they might be in charge of all the roles. So it would be, it would also be a good option, not just for hiring managers, but to also reach out to the founders.
Thanks. Can I share? Is it okay if I share your template?
Yeah.
Cool. So this is the template that Sai uses, which we've worked on together a few times, but it's gone in there. And yeah, you have gotten interviews from these kinds of messages, right? So I think the only thing I would say is that next time, I think you should add in your Calendly link so that you can set up like a 10-minute call with the person and that they could just quickly do that. I actually just noticed it before and I thought that that might be something that you could also do. But thanks so much, Sai. We hope that you land your visa sponsored job soon. You've been such a trusted member for us. And yeah, we're working hard to make sure that that happens. So thank you for joining and for telling us about how you're doing things as well and how it's working for you.
Thank you. And also, it's like for anyone who want to join the community, we do have, two Q&A sessions every week. So, it's like the reason that I got to this level was it's like I had like 10 to 15 iterations. I would just do something and, get into the Q&A, get the feedback, implement the feedback, and, rinse and repeat the same thing again and again. So you have the opportunity to do it.
You're gonna get member of the month this month too if you're not careful. Okay, thanks so much, Sai. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we will see you inside Migrates probably tomorrow at our interview workshop. So yeah, see you then. Go into how do you really get noticed? Because I know that we've just covered outreach, why it's important, how to do it, how you should be going about it, which kind of companies you should be targeting. But how do you actually really, really get noticed? If I say really, really more than once, then you guys will understand that these kinds of methods are important. So, unconventional outreach, the Migrates Me deck, ResLink, and social media. So I'm going to run through all of these three things and explain to you what all of them entail. So what is a Migrates Me deck, I hear you ask? Well, it's very simple. It doesn't have to necessarily be something that you use as in our own templates. It can be something that you can create. But a Migrates Me deck is your personal pitch document. It's the best way that you're going to present exactly who you are to an employer when you're reaching out to a business that is either hiring or not hiring, but one that you might be interested in. It's more creative than a CV and less generic than LinkedIn. And this is what it looks like. We actually have a whole presentation explaining how to build one that Rim has created. But it's 3-4 slides detailing exactly who you are, highlighting your key accomplishments, and positioning you as the most keen candidate. So we have hired at Migrates in the past. We're not hiring now before anyone starts to message us, but we have hired at Migrates in the past. And when I see someone reaching out in a way that showcases their portfolio, their profile, something visual, it's always going to get my attention over someone who is just applying with a regular CV and a generic email. And I find that the Migrates Me deck, it has really just positions you as such a strong candidate because It doesn't have to be long. It just has to be 3 to 4 slides. One slide, telling the employer exactly who you are. Maybe you've helped in data, you've created some kind of internal systems of operation that have changed the way that a company functions and works. Maybe in marketing, you've led on several creative campaigns and you can create those campaign highlights. Maybe even if you're in policy, you can be doing something around the policies you've worked on. You don't even have to list the companies, like if there's a non-disclosure agreement in place, but what you should be doing is highlighting this information so that it's clear to an employer what your experience has been. The second slide can again focus on more around what you want to be doing, so maybe some of your transferable skills and how they can you can do like, this is a skill that I've acquired, and with an arrow to another skill that is required of the job itself. Or it could just be focusing on the goals of your career, the things that you want to accomplish. And then like a third slide can be about why exactly that business. So what you like about their company, what you like about the business, etc. So that is the Me Deck very briefly explained. So actually I want to give someone a shout out because we had someone join Migrates yesterday. So thank you, Halima, for messaging Rim. She joined Migrates and just went through our resources and saw the Me Deck and went through the Me Deck and sent Rim a message just to say that, it was her first exposure to the concept and she found it incredibly insightful. So Halima, we're going to see you in the Q&A, hopefully on Monday, that we can run through your Me Deck with you and actually give you feedback on it so that you can be more prepared and have better assets for when you're applying. Now, Natalia, who is, believe it or not, from outside of the UK, she's from Finland. She posted about this in the community. When she's saying she wanted to celebrate a small win, she had a chat with another member about crafting a Me Deck as part of a job application. So she got another member to help her, and she scored her first interview in this whole process by using the method. It feels special because so far I've mainly received generic rejections. Yay, I'm off to prepping for the interview now. Since then, Natalia actually landed this role, and she got sponsored in less than 3 months or so. In 2 months since joining Migrates, she got sponsored through using the Me Deck, assets and resources. And look, again, you don't have to join us officially, but you can basically use what I've just told you, create a kind of 3 to 4 page presentation on who you are. And as a result, start sending that out to employers and just saying very politely, hopefully you don't mind, I've attached something that shows you a little bit about who I am and why I want to be working in your business. So yeah, Natalia is a superstar, and we're really proud of her. Now, what if you'd rather pitch yourself via video? Well, our friends at Tech Talk, who you might know, they are very, very big on Instagram, and they have like a huge business in helping people land jobs in tech. And they're friends of ours, and they also help Migrates, and they coach within the Migrates platform. So they do coaching sessions. They are they're some of the masterminds behind ResLink. And ResLink is a great tool to basically create a video alongside your CV that showcases your personality and showcases who you are and allows you to pitch yourself into an employer in under 90 seconds. Don't do 90 minutes. 90 minutes would be way too long. Keep it to 90 seconds. And it can also provide insights into how many times it was opened. And they're developing some AI technology right now to further kind of implement that into their product so that you can really, optimize and create like a really strong profile with the ResLink link that you create. Basically, I'm just going to talk through kind of the screen grab. So essentially, what ResLink does is it allows you to capture your CV and then pitch yourself in a video format alongside your CV. Because the reality is that, with your CV, it is such a static resource that when an employer looks at a CV, they don't know who you are. They don't know the person behind the CV. They just see a bunch of text. And what ResLink does is it allows you to really create that personality and that, approach, which is way more personal to an employer when you're pitching yourself to a job opportunity, or even if it's just to talk to them about their own experience, about, what they're doing and showing how your experience might be valuable to them and, wanting to connect and just discuss their experience, your experience, and the future of their business. So what I would suggest that everyone does is basically we're going to have some homework available. So I want to just also share, I'll share this information as well. But essentially, the things that you need to do to create a strong res link is have a really good introduction, highlight some of your key qualifications, showcase your unique selling point, and also end with a strong closing, and do that all within 90 seconds. So they do have video tools available to show you how to actually do this and how to do it in a way that is impactful. So what I want everyone to do for homework, and I'm going to go back to the slide in 2 seconds on how to use this. I want you guys to scan this. I want you to create a res link for us and a version of a cold outreach email to hello@migreats.com. And if you do this, we will review it. We will discuss our review and kind of what we think on tomorrow's call, which is sponsorship negotiation. And we're going to give you something really, really special. So I know that this is going to take you a little bit of time. It's probably going to take you an hour or so on your Saturday. But I would really, really recommend that you do this, because if you do it and you pick your pick tomorrow, we're going to give you something that you will be very happy about. So scan this. I'm going to leave this on for like another 2 seconds, and then I'm just going to go back 2 slides so that you can also understand how to actually use ResLink as well. What is the most unconventional approach? And this is one that I really do think is a bit different, but it does work and it does get results as well. Using social media. So we live in a time when social media, I mean, LinkedIn is the next Facebook. I see so many people's life updates on there that don't really belong on LinkedIn, but social media is how we all connect. It's how we find things. It's how we pitch ourselves. It's how we present ourselves. It's a great tool that you can use when you're job hunting as well. So let's just show an example of Nadine. So Nadine is one of our Migrates members, and she created a video of her trying on clothes from Her, which is a rental fashion brand. And she posted it on TikTok and sent it to the person who was hiring for the social media role. And she got into an interview process as a result of that. She actually went for a different role, and she got sponsored at a different company called Papier. But she did use this approach to land herself an interview and get noticed in the process of actually applying for a job. It wasn't asked for, it was fully unprompted. This video went viral, and she managed to get quite a lot of good results out of it. Obviously, she works in marketing. And if you're not doing things like this in marketing, then you have to kind of rethink your strategies, especially if you're going for B2C marketing roles. I have a marketing background. People that are in marketing need to be pitching themselves in a creative way to brands if you want to be working within a business. I can talk about this for hours. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but this is for someone who is working in marketing. So what if you're not working in marketing? I spoke about this with Taifa. So Taifa, she still is working in marketing, but she doesn't do B2C, she does B2B. And what she did here was, I spoke about this yesterday with like LinkedIn and how to use it as a platform that allows you to post content. She called out the businesses around the ones that she applied at, and none of those companies had actually responded to her. But she mentioned all of them in this LinkedIn post, and she got these companies to reach out to her off the back of this post because she discussed exactly how she applied to these businesses and what she did to showcase that she was different. Um, you know, didn't get like huge traction, only got 4 comments. All those people responded to her because she fully called them out. Like she didn't hold back. And I think that is really impressive. She landed a job. It's not sponsored yet, but she's also someone that we really value in the community, and we will hopefully help her with making sure that that job does get sponsored as she continues to work there. So now that you've landed an interview, what's next? So you've used all these tools, you've used all this information. Now you've actually landed an interview. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, that's what's happened. Awesome. What happens next? Let's talk a little bit about do's and don'ts when it comes to interviewing. First of all, the things that you should be doing: researching the employer, researching the interviewer, connecting with the relevant stakeholders on LinkedIn, being polished. So attending the interview, making sure that you look great, you're presentable, etc. And then thinking of 1 to 2 ways to break the ice. So this is really important, and this is something that I'm going to be discussing in the next few slides, but breaking the ice and building rapport is really important when you're interviewing. Now things that you shouldn't be doing: winging it, not understanding the product, not understanding competitors, and looking unprepared. These are the things that you should absolutely not do when you're going into interviews, because interviews are where you land the opportunity to get sponsored. Like that is your gateway to sponsorship. If you are the best candidate in the interview, you are going to get sponsored. That is just my utmost belief. If the company is open to it, that's what will happen because they're willing to do it for the right candidate. And tomorrow we'll be actually running through how much it costs, so you also understand from a financial perspective, what it takes for a company to actually go through this process. Now, an essential for a good interview is building rapport. And what I mean by that is, I know that for many people on this call, English might not be their first language. Communication is something that might not come naturally to them. Like, I definitely think I'm more of an extrovert. Rim, do you think you're an extrovert or an introvert?
I'm an ambivert.
Okay. But some people are a little bit more introverted or ambiverted or whatever verted. But the reality is that you need to build a human connection with the interviewer from the get-go, which is hard to do, especially if you're doing it remotely. But it is something that you can do in the first few seconds of the interview. Like, remember, it does only take 20, 30 seconds to create a long lasting impression. So when you first join a call, make sure that you're smiling, that you're, engaging with the interviewer, that you're asking them questions about their weekend or about the weather or about, what they're doing today. All of these things are really important. I know it sounds very basic, but it is things that you need to be doing in order to build a good interview. Rim actually once got the job because she brought a book into an interview. Rim, do you want to quickly discuss what happened in this interview?
Yeah, it was actually my very first sponsored role. And at the time, I had just finished my degree on computer science and I was reading up on graph databases, which I found absolutely fascinating, a little bit geeky, but I didn't even do it on purpose. I just happened to, be reading that book. And I took it with me to the interview. And then literally for 10 or 15 minutes, my interviewer, we just spoke about graph databases. They didn't even use them in the business. But I think we just bonded and connected over that prompt book. And that kind of really set the tone for having a great kind of more of a conversation rather than a kind of a one-sided or a mechanical interview. Not planned. It was not, I did not intend for that to happen, but it did happen.
And I once brought cupcakes, and that was actually the business that I convinced to get their license to sponsor me. And the reason why, obviously it wasn't because of the cupcakes. This is just a funny way of saying it, but I was in the final stages of an interview process. I had to present a marketing presentation. There were 5 other candidates. I went above and beyond for the presentation. I did it on perception versus reality. I'm not going to get into it more than that, but I brought cupcakes, and half of the cupcakes were vegan and half of the cupcakes were non-vegan. And I had the people taste the cupcakes after doing this whole presentation on vegan/non-vegan cupcakes and had them guess which ones were vegan and which ones weren't. Now, that specific touch and that creativity is what set me apart, and actually is literally what they said when they hired me. They said, you blew us out of the water on how creative you were when you were interviewing and presenting your materials. So, you can bring a book, you can bring cupcakes, you don't have to bring anything, but you need to just be thinking around how can you connect with the person that is doing the interview. Even if an interview tanks, you can still save it. And this is what I did. I actually had my 3rd sponsored role at Cedars. I got rejected. They said that I wasn't that I didn't do well in the task. And I asked them for feedback. And on the call, when they were giving me the feedback, they said, we don't think you really understood the task. And I said to them, listen, if I can get you something in the next 24 hours, that is the right way to approach the task. Can you guys give me another shot? And they did. And this is the 3rd company that sponsored me because I was actually successful in that. So I've included the message, it was so funny because before this email, they called me and they were like, "Oh, do you have time to speak?" And they were very, they were a bit stern. So I knew that I probably wasn't successful. And then afterwards, they were like, "Thanks for taking the time. We really enjoyed the conversation. And, great suggestions to come back and prove some of the things you may have learned from the call. I think this provides a good basis for understanding your ability to learn on the job." So I literally flipped that conversation because they were worried that I wouldn't be able to do well in the job on its head. And I presented to them the correct materials that actually did land me the job in the end. So, I think that goes to show that you can change things even if they're not going the right direction that you wanted initially. So, turned rejection into a job offer. But most importantly, you need to understand what you're signing up for. And this is where Rim is going to be covering analyzing job specs and interview methodology. So I'm going to pass it over to Rim to talk about this topic.
Thank you, Karina. And I think actually here I wanted to speak to a very common experience, which I have gone through and I have seen so many people go through, which is typically when you are like going through the sponsored job hunt, you spend so much time not hearing back that when you actually like for the first time hear back and like you are invited for an interview, sometimes you feel like you're underprepared or that, you know, like you feel very disconnected from actually the substance of the thing that you ideally want to do or like the role title that you are job hunting for. And so with this section, hopefully I will be sharing with you what I think is one of the most important parts when it comes to the interview prep when you reach this stage. And that definitely will help you in making sure that you are setting yourself up for success. So here, I really, if there is one takeaway from this whole section about interviewing, if there's one keyword that I want you to remember, it's virtue signaling, because that is literally how a hiring manager and a recruiter essentially experience the whole process of interviewing. And essentially what virtue signaling really means is it is just like a more sophisticated way of saying that you need to essentially showcase that you are the right fit for the role. But you need to do that in the language that the people on the other side, recruiters and hiring managers, actually speak. And here, actually, so the way you go about this, you go about essentially understanding their language and speaking that and being very intentional about, again, virtue signaling you being in on the exact same language and experiences that they have, is to essentially go through this very important preparation step, which is the job description analysis. And so if we go to the next slide, Karina, please. There's definitely a step-by-step process that I'm going to take you through during this presentation. And please feel free to take screenshots, remember it, watch this section again when we send the recording. Which is literally, if you follow this step-by-step process, it will take away so much of the anxiety of the interview prep and make you feel really empowered and more focused on actually paying attention to the things that are important, which is being present and engaging in the conversation of the interview. So step number one is we need to copy, paste, and analyze the job description. I know that it can be very tempting in the era of ChatGPT and big LLMs to kind of rely on that. But actually, when you reach the interview stage, it is, you have made it so far already that you really want to invest a little bit more in connecting actually with the role that you're applying to and that you're going to interview for. And this step, I cannot stress highly enough the importance of going through it, because that kind of really gives you the foundation that's going to help you throughout the other interview stages that you're going to go through. Now, after you copy paste and start analyzing the job description, essentially what you want to be doing is you want to find different buckets of skills and core competencies and keywords so that you understand, you have a holistic overview of what's going to be required from you. Number three, now that you have absorbed that information, you need to essentially start the process of really practicing connecting with what is asked from you or what will be asked from you to showcase for this role by reflecting back on past experience and connecting that past experience to how it would be relevant to the role that you are interviewing for. Now four, and this is how you can use AI effectively, is once you have done this leg and prep work, you want to start essentially playing with AI so that you can generate different questions and then start practicing your different answers from different angles and having these different scripts that you can easily recycle. And you practice that until it comes easy to you. So effectively, what does that mean? So for example, here, this is an operations analyst role for Paddle. Paddle is a payment software service product for companies. They're really great, very cool startup to work for. And at the moment, they are hiring for an operations analyst. So you come across the job description on LinkedIn or elsewhere. You like them, you like what they stand for, and you want to go for it. And you do, and then you hear back. And now you're having your first interview with them, be it with a recruiter or even later on with a hiring manager. So what happens next? First step of the process that I shared, if we go please to the next slide, is exactly what I mentioned in terms of making sure that you're connecting with the job description and familiarizing yourself exactly with what the role entails. And here, my recommendation is to essentially like go in with like two colors, and you want to highlight two bits. The first one is the skills, the keywords, and the core competencies. So when you go into like this first kind of one pager, initially there's just so much going on. So really the outcome from this exercise is like by the end of it, in your mind, you almost have this very clear mental map of like the different buckets of skills that are required from you when it comes to this role. So that's kind of number one. So here, for example, you can see that I did that, and it's everything that's highlighted in yellow. So I literally just kind of in a very linear way started reading through the job description. And here you can already start essentially seeing some very important core competencies bucket. So for example, leading projects from conception to delivery, operations, marketing, sales, commercial efficiency, sales funnel, business performance, dashboards, workflows, go-to-market, data-driven insights. So again, it's not like a hard and fast rule of like just, a specific keyword or a specific concept. It's just everything that feels relevant in the context of essentially this business role. And then your second color that you want to go with is essentially highlighting your technical skills. And here I went in with the blue, and essentially I'm highlighting everything that would be slightly technical. And here technical can really go from like heavily technical, like tech stack when you're a software developer or a data person, to actually kind of more soft, like technical skills. So more kind of using pieces of software that you need to be kind of familiar with in a marketing setting or even like in an operational setting. So here you have things like Salesforce, APIs, native integrations, SQL, HubSpot, Stripe, PayPal. So like the technical stack that you would essentially need to be familiar with or have had exposure to. So you do this, right? Objective, done. So now that you actually have done this step, what you want to do next, so now you did the kind of the human connection level with that specific job description. Now this is where like you working smart and not hard starts. And this is where we start using AI in a very smart and intentional way. So what that effectively means, you want to use like a set of prompts. Obviously you can kind of play with this and find what works and what doesn't for you. But essentially what we want is we want to bucket these like different things that now that you have gone through the job description and you're already starting to put together like a human mental map, you want like to use like AI so that it can actually do that execution, and then you can kind of cross check that in your mind and understand like what are the big themes that we're working with here. And in this case, there is definitely like a huge theme around the revenue operations and process optimization. It is like an operational role, so that's kind of one really important. And then two, there's definitely a theme around data analysis and insights. They mentioned SQL, they mentioned like integrations, dashboards, workflows, and reporting. So that's like a kind of an important other theme that shaped up. Number three, tech stack and tooling. Again, so this is because it is a software that sits on other pieces of software, there is like a huge theme around being very familiar with these like different pieces of software. And then finally, there are kind of more generic categories that you do not necessarily need to kind of speak to, but it's still important to like have that on your radar. So one being problem solving and thinking about like how to scale things. And the final one is obviously soft skills. Now, going into the kind of second step of this process, what you want to do is follow up with another prompt. And you want to kind of go into these like different sections. And then what you want to do is that you understand the section, you understand the theme of the core competency, but now you want to essentially start thinking about your own experience that would showcase that core competency. And the way you do that is by practicing through questions. And so essentially, in this case, like for example, for like revenue operations and like go-to-market process, one question would be, these are all behavioral questions, by the way, but they're very important for you to reflect on your past experience and be able to articulate it in a clear way that lands and in a language that is very familiar to the job description itself. So for example, we have, can you walk us through a time when you identified and implemented an improvement in a go-to-market process? What was the impact? So that gets you to think about like any sales experience that you have had, whether you have had go-to-market experience or not. You can still, try to think about what would be the closest thing to that. Is it marketing? Is it sales? Is it business development? Is it, like something that could still be reframed in that way? Now, if we go please to the next section, Yeah, so that's essentially like the most important part, which is you articulating your own experience. And here again, you can continue on like using an open source, and this would be the prompt that I would actually use after feeding it your CV. Or better yet, actually, if you know you don't want to kind of do that on a like in a repetitive way, you can actually use, if we can please go to yeah, so we have actually an AI powered job board that does this exactly for you. So like once you add the role, so this role was actually added to the job board. So as soon as like you add it to the job board, there is actually like an AI tools section which you can have access to. And essentially, when you do that, there is the option to select. So there are like different bits, like kind of pre-prepared set of like prompts that this has been trained on. And then you just essentially like click on interview prep questions. And then actually what it does, because it already has access to your CV, it literally like computes those answers for you. And then you can essentially just read what the answer is and then tweak it so that you're comfortable with like the flow and like you actually agree with how it's selling your experience. And you can even export it like to a PDF. Yeah, exactly how you can see it here. And boom, like in 2 clicks, literally you have this done for you and you can just kind of start going in. You can print these, you can highlight them, you can kind of go through the STAR method, which it uses, which is like situation, task, action, and result, which is a very important framework for you to be familiar with and to actually use, because human brains respond really well to this way of laying out information. Like this is the situation, like for example, so that question number 5, describe an experience where you had to lead a project from conception to delivery. How did you ensure its success? So we start, for example, with like the situation. So at, you know, X employer, I was responsible for essentially like a specific project. And then the task here was, again, to explain exactly from an individual standpoint what you did given that situation. So in this case, it would like be designing and implementing a reporting system that would, again, focus on the impact, provide ongoing insights into operational performance. So that's the kind of the brief, like this is what was given to me. And then comes the action, which is essentially, you know, this is what I did. I have collaborated with, you know, cross-functionally with different teams. I have, you know, upped like my communication, both verbal and like written. I have given updates. You know, for example, here you can be very specific and say, you know, like I have developed a specific format for like daily Slack updates or like Microsoft Teams updates, and just kind of use that as like an asset that I would recycle kind of every week to make sure that like all stakeholders involved would actually be in the loop. And finally, the results. So again, whatever success was defined to be. So, you know, the reporting system actually functioned well. The failure rate was, you know, like very low, or like the satisfaction, like all the pieces that we covered around impact yesterday when I spoke about like the CV section would be actually great examples to use here. Now, once you do actually this entire process, and I understand that typically you're like prep mode, tunnel vision, you're very much in your head, you're doing all of this individually, you know, you're feeling a little bit of anxiety because you've been preparing for this thing, and then like it's gonna, you know, it's gonna come up, and there's just like so much that actually, you know, like comes with like the pressure of having that one interview that maybe you're just hearing back from like after weeks of like not hearing back. So there's all of this going on. And I think it's really important for you to kind of acknowledge, but I really need you to remember that ultimately when you are in that room, when like you start that virtual call, or like when you meet them even in person, that people hire people. They don't hire robots. They don't hire, you know, like someone who's just going to learn something and rehearse it. And so really your ultimate goal here is to be present in that conversation, and really, so hopefully the prep work should take away from the anxiety of like you not knowing the substance that you're going to talk about. And when you do that prep, that anxiety is gone, so that you can actually focus, like once you are in the interview, you know, like under the stress, in real life, you can actually focus on the conversation because you like you already know the structure and the substance of the things that you want to talk about. So as I said, your energy is really key. Remember like that book example that we mentioned earlier? Like it's that energy aspect, because you really want to connect with the person. You want to have a conversation and not for this to feel like, you know, an exam that you're going through. So ultimately what this means is you remembering, please, like on the day, sleep well and hydrate. This is like, it really starts there. tap into your curiosity, which is like a very expansive place to come at like that human conversation from. Again, approach it as a conversation, not as like an exam. And actually, in preparation for that, what I would highly recommend is record yourself answering one of these star methods. Like literally pull up your phone, like when you prep, put it like in front of you and just record yourself and watch that recording back. And I promise you, like all the things that you observe that you can like self-correct very easily for will be like absolutely game changing in terms of your performance on the day, because that's like how you become self-aware of like how you kind of talk about yourself and your experiences and your voice and your speed and whether you're doing and all of that. You want to kind of do a little bit of prep so that it does not happen on the day when so much is already going on, you meeting new people, having to articulate your value, absorbing information, being present, because it can definitely, and it is a lot to like be in an interview if you're a little bit out of practice.
There is one question that sets you apart for the rest of the tone of the interview. And this is something that our Migrates coach, Maureen, who does sessions for our community all the time, is going to be doing today. Hey, Maureen, I know that it's very early for you right now, so thank you for joining us. But a little bit about Maureen. She has an MBA in human resources. She's worked 6 years in corporate HR. She has 7 years of professional coaching, and she empowers individuals at critical career junctions. So hi, Maureen. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning. First of all, I just want to say I am loving everything you are sharing here, and that balance of using the AI tools, using some of those neat tricks to move these processes along, but then always making sure you're bringing in the human is absolutely, it's that perfect balance right there. And that particularly comes to when we're talking about the tell me about yourself question. When I think about the tell me about yourself question, I like to think of the foundation of a house. It is the first question you're going to get asked. It is where we are starting from. And if we set that foundation really nicely, everything just kind of naturally progresses from there. We put together a lot of information that people can then pick on and say, oh, I want to come back and I want to ask about that. Tell me more about that. Here's something, interesting and personal that sounds really engaging. I want to have this person on my team. And so, this is that question that I absolutely love. And I do want to do a huge shout out. Some of you all were very generous with your information yesterday and shared resumes and jobs that you were looking at. And so actually, I took a look last night at those resumes and jobs that were of interest to you, and kind of took a look through and said, okay, how would I go about building a tell me about yourself question if I were you? Now, the tell me about yourself question, it's your longest answer. It's about 3 minutes long, and organization is absolutely key. But Rim did a really, really great job of demonstrating how to prep that job description, that highlighting. If you're me, I'm old school. I print it out and actually sit there and highlight sometimes of what are they talking about? Rim mentioned skills, keywords, core competencies. And then I've got my resume right next to it. And I am just matching over with that color coding. Let's keep it really organized to say, okay, this is a skill they've mentioned. This is a core competency. So I'm actually going to talk through a sort of tell me about yourself wave, because as we're building the tell me about yourself, what we like to do is we want to, as I said, make it sound like we're already inside of the organization, using that language that we've learned from our discussions with them. So we're going to start off at the bottom of the wave with what brought me to the experience. What did I learn along the way as we're building that wave? And then we get to the top of the wave, and the top of the wave, that is sort of the apex of our experience in this role, not our total experience, but in this particular job or in this academic experience. We've kind of hit the peak. We've learned some things. We've gotten really good at it. And then because we're at the top of the wave, we can start to look about in the world and say, okay, I've gotten really good at this skill. What do I need to learn next, or what's going to take me on to my next wave, that next part of my journey. So we start to move down the wave, identifying a new opportunity and transitioning onwards. And you can see everywhere we've got that add text here, that's where you're actually, filling this out. The ease of talking about yourself or doing some of those star answers comes from practice. So I want to do a little shout out to Rakia. I took a look at your information yesterday. Rakia is an HR professional. Loved your resume, by the way. Beautiful template. Very clear. Rakia is an HR professional who's looking at a role within TikTok as an HR business partner role, which is a really classic HR role. It's very much that great entry point. And so I took a look at the TikTok role. I took a look at Rakia's background, and this is kind of what I came up with. So Rakia, within the role for TikTok, they talked about wanting people who demonstrate good judgment, because of course HR is a lot about judgment, as well as people who are good with sensitive information and who can build processes. And Rakia, looking at your background, I noticed that you said in not your most recent role, but your previous role, that you spent a lot of time safeguarding that employee data and making sure it was all secure. So if I were you answering that, tell me about yourself, I might start off with, I've been working in an HR role where I had to spend a lot of time working with employee data, because of course that is the core of what we do here in HR. And so that's why I was really excited to take that job. That's what brought me to that experience. And along the way, I started to build that great judgment, just like what they said in the TikTok job that they're looking for. That's what I started to learn along the way, of how to manage that employee data and make good judgment on the information that I had there. Because of course, we always want to demonstrate great judgment when we're working with people and those employment issues. But as I started to get really good at exercising that judgment and managing that employee data and experience, I started to notice that great judgment is one thing, but how do we make it repeatable? Well, we make it repeatable through processes. And so I transitioned to my current role because it gave me the opportunity to write employee processes and write employee documents so that all the great judgment that I've learned can become a repeatable thing that I can translate into actions for other HR professionals and even for the people that I'm working with, so that they know there's a really nice standard of process. And that's why I moved on to my most current role, where I'm building out these employee processes. So you can see, and this can be applied to any, really any industry, any role, is why did I want to take this job or pursue this degree? Well, it was going to teach me this. And along the way, I started to learn that skill. I got really good at it. And then as I got good at that, I said, okay, what else do I need? Or what is a new area of interest that's developed, or a new technology? And I made that's the next wave I want to move to. So I started to transition downwards and out of my current opportunity and into that next one. Yeah, way to go, Rakia. HR professionals sharing the little HR love. Would you mind advancing the slide to the next one? Awesome, thank you. But that's one portion of your experience. That might be one job, or one academic experience, or even one volunteer experience, because we can learn a lot. If you are helping, manage logistics at the local food bank, that's tremendous experience that absolutely can be applicable. So then what we do, because, using this little metaphor, our life is an ocean, I guess, we are building all of these waves together and building on top of each other across that timeline of experience. So we might start off with experience one of, I graduated from my undergraduate with a degree in computer science. And I took my first data analyst job, where I was working on different software programs, as well as maybe analyzing some data. And I started to get really good at these things, and I learned these things, and then I transitioned outwards. And then I moved on to my next job, where I actually got to manage a team or work with an international team or a cross-functional team of data people. And that leads us to, where we are today, and that question of, why are we talking today? I think you've definitely heard the theme through everything that Rim and Karina have shared about making this personal, using that tech to make it personal. with sharing, what you know about that company. You can see we're integrating that language of, what they've put in the job description, what we know from talking about them. We're building all of that language into our answers here. So then by the time we land at why are we talking today, if I'm your recruiter, I should be sitting there saying like, yeah, I get it. This person, I understand. I'm seeing all the skills. I'm seeing the interest. It totally makes sense. I should almost be nodding along with you in my mind, being like, yeah, we are vibing here. And so then you end up at that, why are we talking today? Which I think Karina and Rim are going to spend a little time chatting about, but just some things to think about there is, if we're ending up at that, why am I talking today? As you can see from all of the experience that I've shown, it really makes sense that we're talking today because, this role has XYZ, or it builds on my experience in this. And I'm really excited about what I can help you with today. And using, I think Sai said it really nicely, like using that insights in your application, in your discussion of, here's all the things that I know you all are looking for. And so it totally makes sense that we're talking today. I'm so excited to have that opportunity to chat with you about what I'm doing.
Thank you so much, Maureen. We love having you with us and just helping our community. And yeah, Maureen does a lot of our coaching sessions. And yeah, you're just fantastic. So thank you for giving that really quick. But I mean, look at all the comments. Everyone's saying this is so smooth and adaptable to their own structure. So yeah, thank you. Really
Oh,
appreciate
it's
it.
my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully you can have a coffee.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'll be heading there next.
yeah. So now that you know the question of how to answer the question of how, tell me about yourself, you probably want to know the answer to, do you need sponsorship? And cliffhanger of the year, that's happening tomorrow. So it's going to be probably our biggest session. Same time, same place on Zoom. We're going to be getting really into it. We're going to have 3 success stories from migreats on the call telling about their story. But before we go, we have another gift. We want to give you access to migreats for free by giving you a money back guarantee. So if you join our platform, use our job board. If you don't like it, you have 7 days to tell us that you don't want to stay with us. We won't be offended. We might ask you why, but we won't be offended. So all you need to do is scan this QR code and use the code day2. And this is what you get inside of migreats. We've got a job board with over 10,000 roles from companies who sponsor. You will get access to it if you join now as part of this offer. Q&As, weekly CV reviews, weekly career coaching workshops, bi-weekly interview prep, over 150 hours worth of recorded content and resources, including workshops with Maureen, sponsorship negotiation materials, webinars with recruiters, immigration specialists, and employers. And if you join, you will also be in the webinar that's happening next Wednesday with Yoan, the CMO, ex-CMO of Deliveroo, and Depop. And you will also be able to join an interview workshop that takes place with me on Sunday. So I'm after the sponsorship negotiation session, I typically go and help members prepare for interviews. So hopefully that's been really helpful. And thank you all for your time and for your attention and for your energy. And yeah, we really appreciate you, and have a good rest of your day.